Welcome to Sex is Medicine, your #1 resource for holistic sex education. I'm Devi Ward-Erickson, and I invite you to join me every week for another enriching and powerful conversation about the intersection of sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. Each episode of Sex is Medicine is dedicated to awakening your heart and mind to the true purpose and power of human sexuality. Please join me on this journey of self-discovery as we explore the art of using pleasure as medicine to awaken, heal, and empower every area of your life. Sex is Medicine broadcasts every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio Network. You can listen to the replay and subscribe to Sex is Medicine on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And now get ready for another episode of Sex is Medicine. Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Devi Ward-Erickson, here with you yet again for another adventure online, talking about sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. Make sure you stay connected to us between these awesome and amazing episodes at Authentic Tantra on Instagram and Facebook. And make sure you sign up for our multitude of free offerings at our website, authentictantra.com. We've got ebooks, we've got videos, we've got a YouTube channel, we've got all kinds of fun and juicy stuff that we've been curating for you for the past 8 years. There's so much content. So make sure that you tune in and tap in and start reaping the benefits of the glory of understanding sex as medicine. So this evening I have, as you can see, for those of you who are watching the video online, you can see my friend and associate and colleague, Laurie McCraken, joining me here live in person because she's at my location with me. And it's such a wonderful thing after COVID to be able to connect with people live and in person, though we know COVID isn't over. It's still running rampant, but for those of us who have been vaccinated and are able to share time and space safely with each other, we very much appreciate that. So Laurie is here with me to talk about how she used sex as medicine to transform her life from a nun into a practicing Tantrika. Laurie is also one of our Tantra Mastery instructors and certification instructors. And I was just talking with Christopher last night about how just blessed and honored we are to have people of your caliber as part of our team. And it's just, I mean, there aren't words to describe how much I admire you and how much I admire Karen and Sequita and Brian and all of our team members, because you guys are just phenomenal. And it's a privilege to be able to work with you. So here we are, wanting to share Laurie's wisdom with the world. And because it's such a fucking amazing story, Laurie. I am unique in that I went from monk to stripper to monk to Tantrika, but you went from nun to Tantrika. You skipped the whole stripper part. So
maybe that's to come.
Here, maybe one of our another videos could be like stripping for nuns 101. So I wanted to share your incredible, remarkable story with all of our audience because it has touched, moved, and inspired so many people. So Laurie McCraken, tell us about you. So what do you call yourself now?
What is your official title? Myself 5-element healing practitioner.
Woo, woo, woo. Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, I am just so honored to be here and to be able to have the connection that I have with someone who helped me to transform my life. I don't recognize myself from just a few years ago. And anybody who has seen me in the last 5 years won't recognize me either. But it's been such an amazing journey and one of healing that I never imagined was even possible. And until I finished the program, I was so ashamed of my story. Wow. And when I look back now, I can laugh and be really grateful and see all the points that connected me and brought me here. And so I think what I want to just let all your listeners know is that since I've been able to do this, I know you can, no matter what situation you're in. And I know myself, I felt broken. I felt hopeless. I didn't know that there even was a pleasure potential that I could experience in my own life. I was filled with anxiety. I was a nurse and a workaholic in that as an oncology nurse. And I had been in religious community for 20 years. So I had the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience for all that time. And I can look back now and say, I'm so grateful that my body loved me enough to shut me down. I got severely depressed. And I realize now it was because my body was trying to tell me, you can't just be spiritual.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And I didn't realize at the time that it was because of actual sexual trauma from when I was 5 years old that had created the conditions so that I didn't feel safe in my own body or in relationship with other people, particularly men, to be fulfilled as a human being. And so I just, from that point of being so disconnected and disassociated from my body to where I am now, and the joy, the delight to be in my own body and appreciate that and appreciate the people that I live with, that I love, and be able to connect in meaningful ways was something that I never thought was possible. And to experience that is like the greatest medicine. And even though that happened for me later in life, it doesn't matter. Like age doesn't matter for our sexuality, for our healing. Whenever we start and wherever we're at, that's such a gift. So I think the thing is that I didn't realize until I got sick and couldn't function that my body mattered. That I knew, I think, a little bit after that I had a body image issue, but I had no idea that I hated and was disgusted by my own genitals until I started working and started to heal my connection with my sexuality. And so I say that because I think sometimes, there's layers and layers to us understanding and getting to know ourselves, and being able to hold compassion for those parts of us that are in pain and that we don't know how to connect with ourselves. And that was the other thing that I so appreciated about this program, was the incredible support. We all need support to become who we are and to become fulfilled human beings. And so you don't have to go this intensely at it as I did.
I used to go hard or go home. That's the only way to do Tantra.
Right? But so I had quite a bit of time of support from my therapist, who was a dear friend and an anchor for me, and the first person that I think I ever felt heard by and experienced compassion from. And I was in my 40s at that point. And I would always smile. I was a very happy person on the outside, but because I didn't want anybody to know or ask questions, when on the inside, I felt like I was dying. And I didn't know who I was. My identity at that point was as a nurse. That's what I knew how to do. That's what I was good at. That's what I loved doing. So I dove into that, and that was my life. But outside of that, I didn't know who I was or what my potential was to even be in relationship with people outside of a work environment. And I didn't realize that at the time, right? Because that was my life. But now looking back and seeing how far I've come, and the hope that I feel so strongly and passionately for any of you that feel stuck in a way that you don't know where to go or how to move forward. is seeking. I was seeking at that point, looking, follow your heart, like it's out there. And I had no idea that something like authentic Tantra existed. And of course, being a nun, I wouldn't have even looked at it. But I was lucky enough when I got to energy medicine school to be introduced to people that would say things like, Laurie, you have none written across your forehead, like you are a virgin. And I was horrified. I didn't want that. And I didn't realize how shut down I was. But luckily I was with people. I was on a journey to discover and get to know myself and other people that felt safe to be with, that could support me. And so, for example, and of course, we were dealing with the different chakras. So sexuality and all of this stuff started coming up that I had never dealt with. So just to give you an idea, when I was 58 is the first time I had sex.
Sexual intercourse.
Consensual sexual intercourse. With a man.
With a penis holder.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. And how that man ever got me to trust him is still a mystery to me, but he was like an angel for me at that time in my life. And I was in school, and the dean of the school had said, Laurie, you know what? Your sexuality is this big. Your spirituality is this big. And that's not okay.
Yeah, the imbalance.
The imbalance is way too much. So she wanted me to go out with a man and with a woman so that I could get to know what my sexual orientation was at some point in my life. And well, I love how life supports us and just people that it put in my path. And so I ended up going to New York, thought I had the job that I had dreamed of with a mentor of mine. And I met her hairdresser, who was, it's so funny. He's a hairdresser, a dance instructor, and a wrestling match instructor. And he was someone, though, that was so comfortable in his body. And he offered to give me dance lessons. He offered to, get to know me better. And he was my teacher. Mm-hmm. And I kept saying to him, this is Sex 101. Mm-hmm. And it was perfect for me because I couldn't have handled anything more than that at that time. And so, and it helped me. I had to be really honest with him and say, because even though I was a nurse, I had no experience with being with a man. And yet I felt like a teenager then, right? To have someone be interested in me and willing to teach me. And so I was like on cloud 9 for 9 months there. And I don't think I slept.
So I'm going to put a pause you right there, because that is a whole lot. So I want to circle back to a few things that you mentioned. So number one, for our listening audience, so the first time that you had penetrative intercourse was when you were 58. Yeah. So we do get some questions sometimes from people who are, lifelong virgins, or, haven't had intercourse with another person in most of their lives, and they're now in their 40s and 50s and 60s, right? And so they feel so hopeless sometimes, or alone, or maybe it's just a personal choice. You just really don't want to go there. Maybe you're asexual and you're not inclined. But for those people who do want to go there and haven't had the opportunity and have mourned that, I guess I just want to pull that out to really share and focus on that, you're not alone, and that one of our authentic Tantra, instructors, that was your journey. It took you until you were 58 to start having your sexual awakening. But once you said yes to that and started moving towards that and moving with that energy, you're now a Tantrika. I also want to circle back to how this journey all began, which was you initially deciding to become a nun. And so you shared that, in your childhood, you had a incident of sexual abuse or sexual misconduct when you were 5, which is a really critical age for that to occur. And it sounds like the way you coped with that was to disassociate from it entirely, and just and disassociate from your body and disassociate from your genitals, right? And again, I wanted to pull that up because that is so common in the society. And so for those of you who are out there listening and are like, why have I never felt connected to my body or my sexuality, or why do I hate my body and my sexuality? That's trauma. That the root cause of that self-hatred and self-denial and aversion is a wound, is a trauma. So just being mindful of that, and instead of like judging and blaming and shaming ourselves, just acknowledging that we have wounds and using that as an invitation to explore maybe what those wounds were. And so those wounds, how driven we are in our life by those wounds propelled you forward in life to really accentuate the spiritual and disassociate from the physical. And I'm also pointing this out because this is our religious traditions, you guys. This is what almost every major religion on the planet teaches. Buddhism, in a certain path, teaches the Hinayana path, teaches aversion to the form. Hinduism, some forms of traditional Tantra, it's about bypassing the physical and only focusing on the spiritual and energetic. And that is an actual documented trauma response. When our needs for connection and trust and safety as children are not met, one of the coping mechanisms is to disassociate into either the spiritual or intellectual realm, disconnect from the body, and develop an aversion to the physical, because that's where we feel our pain is in the flesh, right? So it's an avoidance technique to cope with this trauma. But this led you to becoming a nun. So how old were you when you became a nun?
I was right out of nursing school, actually. So I was 20 years old.
Wow, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what was this? I mean, that's a unique thing to be a nun. I was a monk, and people are like, you were a monk and you were a nun, right? So what was that like? Why that group, and what was that group about specifically?
Yeah, so that was a group that was all based in unity, building unity in the world. So it was either that, and it was a lay movement, but it was much more strict than most, Catholic orders. And it was within the Catholic Church. I grew up Protestant and became Catholic. But I became Catholic because to me, the word Catholic meant universal. And I really wanted to make a difference in the world. I felt like there was so much pain. I had experienced so much emotional pain myself, and I wanted to support other people not to have to experience that. And I just like, it was that or the Peace Corps, kind of thing, right? Yeah. But because this was about building bridges between religions, between races, all of those things that still have always been in my heart, I thought this was something that would do it. And we didn't wear religious habits. It was the way we lived it. And for me, I need to be able to have whatever I'm doing be a way of life that I can live in every moment of my day and that affects every aspect of my life. So that's what brought me into it. But I didn't realize how unbalanced it was. And that essentially now in hindsight is like a cult. And so what's beautiful to me about that is, though, that deep desire for community, for helping make the world a better place and benefiting other beings is exactly what I found in the Institute of Authentic Tantra. Like when I heard Devi speak, and it was a podcast, I was way back in Massachusetts. And when I heard her say that every orgasm is a glimpse of enlightenment, I'm like, I have never heard that before. And it made so much sense to me. I'm like, that's the missing piece. This is wisdom. This is truth. Like, how do I get to know more about that? And the other thing you said that struck me so much is, in order to be fulfilled as human beings, we need to fully express as our sexuality. And when we do, there will be peace on earth. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes total sense. And somehow I knew, because I had such an aversion to men in general and hatred actually at that point. When I heard you talk I could feel that you were someone who was living what you were speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and that you had healed your own life through these beliefs, these techniques, these methods that you were sharing. And so I knew I would feel safe with you. And I felt so much hope that I would be able to be healed and heal things that I felt hopeless about and powerless about up until that point.
And so thank you for all of that. And what stood out for me is, so we want to heal things. What happens when we're healed?
Wow. Well, I can only say that now I have so much less anxiety. I mean, layers and layers. That's what I don't recognize, that I am at home in my body. I feel good. I can open up and allow pleasure to experience it. And see, what I realized too along the way is that because of that incident when I was 5 years old, until I started unraveling and healing this, and in its own time, I didn't realize that their terror and pleasure had been locked together. I was terrorized in that moment, but I must have also experienced great pleasure. And so every time as I was healing around my sexuality, to ever orgasm, I would feel incredible emotional pain before I could ever get to the pleasure. And I never understood that. But what was beautiful to me is that the methods, like the ocean breath, the way that we breathe, allowed my nervous system to feel safe enough in my own body so I could relax, and I would just start bawling my eyes out, knowing that I was releasing whatever it was that was there that I didn't need to know, but it was allowing the layers of all that stuckness in my cells to be released so that then I could experience more. I could feel what it feels like to be safe. I could feel what it feels like to experience pleasure without having to go through pain.
Wow. And that is so beautifully described. And so the image that I'm getting, and what's really, alive for me right now, is that our baseline as human beings is this bliss, joy, peace, awareness. Like, that's the thing I think that we don't really understand, that like the core of the human design is love and peace and bliss. We're not wired for, pain and suffering and misery, which is why it hurts. We're wired for love and pleasure and connection. That's literally what our brains are designed to thrive with. And so because the society that we live in is so out of alignment with that, we have all this accumulation of pain and shit. And that's, inherited and historical and all those things. It's intergenerational. And so by the time we land here, in this little incarnation that we're in, we have all the accumulation of all that shit in our DNA, but then also we're coming up in this world that just reflects all of that cloudiness back to us. So in order to reestablish that baseline of bliss, which never goes away, that's inherent within us, but we have to excavate. We have to dig through the layers and the wounds. We have to, as you said, release and literally create space in our physical body, in our energy body, our emotional body, all of that. We literally have to create space. And that process of creating space is using the methods that you were describing. So the ocean breathing, the moving towards the genitals and, through pleasurable touch and orgasmic awareness and, all those sexual healing methods, moving towards the thing that we have aversion to. And when we move towards it, we become aware of the pain, right? We become aware of oh my God, look at all this shit. And the mistake that occurs when we don't have guidance and support is we think that the shit is a stop sign. Oh, well, if I was okay, I wouldn't have all this shit. So therefore I need to stop doing this because it's making me aware of all this shit. And when we don't have tools, that shit is overwhelming. I remember back in the day when I was suicidal and stuff, it was there was no pathway through. It was the suffering and I were one. We were one thing, and there was no pathway through the suffering. All there was suffering, right? So that's why support and guidance is so necessary, is to be that shining light at the end of the tunnel of darkness, so to speak, holding the line and saying, I'm here, so focus on me, and so that you get through. And when that anchor is also anchored in pleasure-based awareness, it's not just, I'm going to fuck through this tunnel of misery. It's, oh, I'm going to relax and breathe. Oh, I'm going to orgasm. Oh, I'm going to dance. Oh, I'm actually enjoying myself as I'm moving through this misery. So the misery actually falls away even more effectively and easily, because we're not all constricted and contracted by the pain. That's why pleasure is such effective medicine, is because it allows us to swoon in the bliss, bliss void nature of pleasure, while everything that isn't in alignment with that sloughs off and falls away. And that's such a beautiful description that you gave of that process, and the importance of having, I call pleasure the lube. It's like lubricant, right? Or like trying to get your foot into a shoe that doesn't fit, you put some Vaseline on that shit and slide it right in, right? That's the same thing in terms of healing trauma, or just healing in general, is having the pleasure be the lubricant to facilitate the process with grace and ease.
That's so beautiful. And what you're saying, Devi, is the thing is that most of us have heard these things, but to experience it and to give ourselves permission, because that's what I realized at a certain point, is that my whole life, all my thoughts, my beliefs were like wrapped in shame. And I don't need to focus on that. It's focusing on the pleasure. There's also pain, but that's only half of the equation and half of our life. Why don't we also give credit and try to move into and experience that? Because it's that experience ourselves. It's like, if you can read music, it's great that you can see a beautiful song, but when you hear it, when you're in front of at a concert, and just the vibrations of that, it's a whole different thing. And giving ourselves permission and the support to know, and the tools to know how to feel safe enough in our own bodies. I think it, particularly as women, and a lot of men too, we're not conscious of that. And I know for myself too, that these methods, between the meditation, like how the whole program is so, like, it's just all wisdom, was my experience, because I needed the meditations first. It's like titrating, knowing how to kind of loosen the things that have been stuck and running my life that I wasn't aware of. Now I become aware of them, so I can make a choice.
And I want to pause there to explain a little bit about how the meditations work. So, because you brought that to mind. So the meditations, just so you guys know, are energy body yoga. And so what the Tibetan 5 element meditations do is they begin to clean and purify dense patterns in your energy body. But also the function of meditation is it rewires your brain. It rewires neural pathways. It literally grows, increases parts of the brain that are responsible for like well-being and cognitive functioning, and decreases areas of the brain that are responsible for aggression, right? So it actually heals your brain. So that, for you listening audience, that is the benefit of specifically the Tibetan 5 element meditations. I don't know about other meditations. I can't speak to those in terms of their efficacy for rewiring, but that's one of the reasons why the Vajrayana yoga practices of the 5 elements are so effective, is because of that dual effect of working both on the energy body to eradicate dense energy patterns, but also to literally heal the brain matter and literally rewire the programming. And that's why our reality changes, because we're literally rewiring the software that programs the lens, that dictates the lens that we view life through. That's literally being purified.
It's so powerful. And I think that's when I first realized that, oh my gosh, I did not know the self-negative talk, the depth of it, and how detrimental to my own physical well-being.
That's just violence. It's violence, the violence that we commit against ourselves in our own minds. Like no one can be as cruel as I can be. Right? So that is so huge that you became, that's one of the first things you became aware of, is that undercurrent of self-abuse. Wow.
That was huge. And And now I realize what I love too is that like the 4 pillars of healing that we have, the meditation. So if I'm feeling off or out of balance, I just check in quickly and can say, have I meditated today? Have I moved today? Am I connected with myself or have I connected with someone else? And have I experienced pleasure in any way? And that can be a cup of tea, right? It doesn't have to be sexual pleasure. It's all areas of our life. And for me, that check-in in seconds helps me to say, oh no, okay, so I haven't moved yet. All right. And I notice when I do these practices, I feel connected to myself. I feel whole. I feel calm. I feel present. And I got to tell you, before I was like living in the future, talk about, you know, anxiety of the future and pleasure anxiety. Like I didn't even know that existed. But when I heard that and started learning these tools and practices, I'm like, oh my gosh, they worked in a way that my body couldn't deny and my mind couldn't either.
Yeah.
So it just to feel at home and calm and present for other people as well as myself, and that whatever I'm doing, whether it's washing the dishes or having an orgasm, I can dedicate that to the benefit of all beings. I mean, that's huge to me.
So I love what you're saying in terms of like what you found through this particular modality is this union of your spirituality and your physicality, right?
Yes.
And so just, you know, put you out there, this isn't meant to be an infomercial for authentic Tantra. We were talking about because we love it. This is the show that we love. But whatever your pathway home is, like we celebrate and support that, but you do need a path. In order to excel. But let's circle back to, so you were a nun for, 2 decades, it sounds like. And then you had a breakdown, which it sounds like changed the course of your life and set you on the path to where you are today. So if you're open to sharing, like, what was that breakdown? What was that breakdown and breaking point about? And then what happens as a result of that?
Yeah, so I think it made me realize how disconnected I was from my body.
Wow.
And so I started on the journey of healing and got into therapy, and luckily found an amazing person that supported me to, as she said, like, I'm going to let you borrow my ego until you find yours. And
so Biniaka's making an appearance.
He's
coming for rubs.
Yeah. And so once I started working through that disconnect, which took me a good number of years to get that far. And then I didn't think I'd be able to work again as a nurse. I didn't know what the future of my life would be. And so once I got to a certain point that I realized that I needed to not be part of that religious group, in order to heal, I needed to be on my own and start my own life. And then after many years of that, got into the energy medicine. I started working with emotions to do the emotion code myself, to work with people. I wanted to leave the medical Western world and work on prevention, on healing the innate ability of our bodies, right? Understanding that and moving towards what uplifted me, what brought me joy, and what was healing for me. And I really followed my heart. And so at a certain point, I knew that my sexuality was the next thing to deal with. And so I went to HIGH workshops, which is the Human Awareness Institute, which is all about intimacy, sexuality, and love. And what was important about that for me is that I had never been in a place where I could be vulnerable and was supported and deal with sexuality. And that's when we were doing different exercises that memory started coming up, awarenesses of why and what was happening, of why I had such an aversion to anything sexual around my own body or other people. And so I would go from breakdown to breakthrough, from breakdown to breakthrough. And because it was the first time that I wasn't the one holding space for those being vulnerable.
Wow. you were finally able to be in a container where the space was being held for you.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so huge.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, this is in my late 50s. So, and then after that, at one of those workshops, I met a man who was amazing. And he, as he was supporting me, was in tears himself, said, you know, this is how I white knuckled through this, and I'm happy to help you here. And it was such, it was a very safe space for me to be in a large group. And so I began conversations, and for a number of years, we would talk for hours. And just because he was a recovering Catholic and sexual stunted development too. And it was like our inner children just loved each other. And so we were healing through our conversations. That was such medicine. And then through him, he introduced me to Betty Dodson, who now I'm 62, right? And I just could not believe that this woman was teaching other women how to masturbate. I mean, like in circles of being naked. It's like, I was horrified. And at the same time, something intrigued me when I saw this video of her doing this. And once I got over the absolute shock and disgust, I'm like, oh no, I feel like I'm being called to do a workshop with her. So I went to New York for a weekend with her, being naked with 15 other women from around the world. And I was so scared. I broke out in a rash all over my body. I looked like a leper. And I'm sure it was my fears and vulnerabilities coming out from my bone marrow. And that lasted a year and a half. But I went anyway because I knew I would regret it, as scared as I was.
You had a rash for a year and a half?
Yes.
Oh my God. Oh my God. That's a huge purification.
It was. Wow. That had nothing like that had ever happened.
Wow.
Yeah. And that weekend, with those women and Betty Dodson, I healed 5 decades worth of shame and guilt around my sexuality. It was so amazing. And I think, as Betty says, you know, because there was nothing hidden, we had nothing to hide. And we're showing and naming our genitals. And I mean, just the most absurd thing that I ever could have imagined doing. And yet I was healed in a profound way. And so I went back and like, oh, thank God that's over with. And then I'm like, oh no, there's a certification one coming up, and I felt called to go to that. So I'm like, oh my God. But I knew I had to follow my heart because there was such profound healing there. I became certified in doing these body sex workshops. And before I left Massachusetts, my 91-year-old mother wanted to come. She asked if she could come and be part of it because she didn't understand what on earth I was doing, why I needed to heal my sexuality. But she, seeing the books and hearing the conversations, was realizing she had a lot that was not healed for her too. So I had an opening and she came. And of course, I'm greeting the women naked at the door. We have our vibrators, we're naming our vulvas. And she was right in there with the rest of us, the whole thing. And we had so much fun. And we healed. Like we've always had a good relationship, but there was some veil of something that I couldn't quite understand. And it was really painful for me. After that day, that weekend workshop, there is nothing hidden between us. She saw me in my joy and understood the importance of why this is important to heal. She opened up. And as I was learning about the program here and hearing and feeling called to move out to the West Coast in order to do this in person, she met a 76-year-old man, and they could not move in fast enough, and I could not move out fast enough. So my concern about leaving my 91-year-old mother and moving out west was like how life took care of everything. Let me know that this is my path and this is what I was meant to be doing. And moving out here, because someone had told me, Laurie, if you can move to the West Coast, you will feel so different in your body. And take a sabbatical so that you can do the healing work you need to do. And I knew I needed to do that in person. For me, that was important.
Well, I love how life worked out by sending so your mom has a sexual awakening. It's not just like, oh, life worked out because I got the right pair of shoes. Life worked out because your mom had a sexual awakening and then pulled in a man 2 decades younger than she is. And still to this day, your mom is how old now? She just had her
95.
Just had her 95th birthday and she is still throwing down. She is absolutely like prioritizes her sexual enjoyment. Like that's number one. I remember you telling me she's like telling the doctor, can I still have sex? Like I'm not willing to do anything that is going to interfere with my sex life at 95. So hell yes. Like what a testament to the healing power and the intergenerational healing power.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and to this day, like I know my mother and I, that relationship is so beautiful and so complete. Conversations, I have the deepest conversations with her. She wanted to be my practicum client as I was going through.
Yeah, I remember that. She was one of your first students.
She was. And for Mother's Day, I send her lube. You know, I mean, it's, and so she's been such an inspiration and a reminder that age does not matter. Yeah.
No, it's not the cock block that we're taught it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, and I love that because this is such an important piece of the conversation in terms of sexuality, because so often the conversation is it's heteronormative, though that's changing. It's very white, though that's changing, but also ageism is a huge aspect, right? It's only for the young and the sexy or up to a certain point. And so to have conversations for people to hear you say that like the first time you ever had intercourse was at the age of 58 and you're now 65.
67.
You're 68. You're 68. Oh my God. How did that happen? I know. Oh my God. I mean, you look like you're 45. I know. Okay, you guys, this is a good testament to the power of Tantra. She looks like she's 45 and she's 68. Oh, exactly. I know. And talk about shedding, right? So you're 68 and going strong and having your sexual blossoming. Lama Tashi's 85 and is throwing down. Your mom is 95. So like that's like our sex, this to me speaks so clearly to how our sexuality is such an integral part to our humanity, right? No matter how old we are, it's still a part of us. Like babies masturbate in the womb, right? I mean, so our connection to our genitals is just an inherent part of being human. Yes. Well, what an amazing story, Laurie McCraken, the joyologist. I wanted to have you on because it's such a phenomenal story. It's as like, I think is as unique and intricate and enriching as my own story. And so you are a Tantra Mastery instructor with the Institute, and you're also a certification instructor with the Institute. And you also do work called Emotion Code, which works with the emotions and energy body. So for people who want to get a hold of you and work with you one-on-one, how do they go about doing that?
Well, you can reach me at Laurie at authentictantra.com or at the Institute. I'm on the page of the teacher, the faculty there.
All right. So you can find out more about you at authentictantra.com.
Yes.
Wonderful. And one of our Tantra Mastery instructors, if you want to learn more about how to work with Laurie and all of her myriad of gifts and talents. You won't find Laurie on social media so much because she doesn't like it. I feel ya. But you might see her beautiful face here and there as we promote her as one of our instructors at the Institute. So Laurie, for people who are just beginning their journey of sexual healing and awakening, what are some words to the wise that you might offer for people who are just kind of like, they're aware, you know, they've hit that point in life, they're aware that they want more, they're listening to this podcast, so they're interested in exploring. What words of encouragement or wisdom can you offer to help guide their path?
Yeah, I think trust that impulse because that's your potential speaking. That's your birthright. And trust that following that is going to lead you exactly to where you need to be. And if it's here, that would be great. I would be so honored to support you on that path. But just don't give up. Keep going. You deserve that. You are worthy of that. And you matter. And that desire matters. Your pleasure matters.
And you're never too old. It's never too late. It's never too late. Like how much better to have this, reclaim this before we leave these bodies versus to leave these bodies never having touched that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, my friends, thank you so much. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank
What a beautiful
you.
conversation.
Oh
Thank
my
you all
God.
for joining us this
Yeah.
evening. It's such a gift and a pleasure. I do want to let you guys know that we're going to be wrapping up for the winter this month of October. These are going to be the last episodes of 2021. We're taking November and December off to regenerate and recoup, and we have some exciting stuff in store for you in 2022. So make sure that you go to our website, authentictantra.com, and sign up for all of our announcements so you are in the know about all the fun stuff happening, and stay connected with us between sessions at authentictantra.com website, but also Authentic Tantra on Instagram and Facebook. And make sure you check out our YouTube channel, Sex is Medicine with Authentic Tantra. Have a beautiful night. Let us know your thoughts and feelings. Feel free to send us questions and feedback to the site, and we look forward to connecting with you again next week. Have a beautiful night. You've been listening to Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward Erickson, your #1 resource for holistic sex education. You can listen to and subscribe to Sex is Medicine on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Just search Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward. Stay connected with me and my guests on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Authentic Tantra, and learn how you can use Tantra as medicine to heal, awaken, and empower every area of your life at authentictantra.com. Make sure to tune in to Sex is Medicine every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio Network, and join our watch party every Thursday evening on Facebook at Authentic Tantra. We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward.